Joining us now, Democratic Senator Tim Kaine of Virginia. Senator, good morning. A lot to talk to you about, but as the Select Committee closes this chapter anyway, this June chapter of its hearings, I'm curious of you, from watching from afar, what you make of what you've seen and whether you think there's enough there to indict President Trump or others in the administration.
Willie, I have paid pretty close attention to it, and even though I was here that day and was barricaded in the Capitol in a way that I'm never going to forget, in a way that has really changed my outlook on my job and my country and my own responsibility, there were some new things in this that I found very powerful. The degree to which Donald Trump was willing to put Mike Pence's life and health in danger after Pence had been slavishly loyal to him for 4 years was shocking. And the testimony a couple of days ago of these election workers about what it feels like as a volunteer or a low-level staffer to have the president and his cronies target you and leave you open to violence. That was incredibly powerful testimony.
We had your colleague, Senator Durbin, on last week, and he said pretty plainly, I'm watching this. I see conclusive evidence. I hope the Department of Justice sees it that way. Do you see it as conclusive? Do you hope that the Attorney General takes up this case?
I think he has to. I think he has to. I think the evidence is there. And, there was a lot of debate during the impeachment proceedings of President Trump that, presidents get immunity during their time in office for legal proceedings by the DOJ or others, but that immunity expires once they're out. And I think the facts are clearly on the table, without being a criminal lawyer myself, what exactly might be the federal code provision. But I think facts are clearly on the table that would suggest that the president and others engaged in a massive conspiracy, including being willing to countenance and encourage violence to overturn an election and disenfranchise 80 million people that voted for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. There has to be some accountability for that.
So, Senator, the evidence that the American people have seen, obviously compelling. The numbers of Americans watching these hearings, I think it surprised everybody, including members of the committee themselves. I'm curious, any evidence at all that your Republican colleagues in the Senate are finding this evidence compelling, that they are more concerned today than they were in the past about what Donald Trump did in his final weeks, final months in office?
Joe, I wish I could say yes, but my Republican colleagues are really trying hard to not pay attention to this. I mean, obviously, there was a fork in the road in about March of 2021 where we had a vote in the Senate about whether this commission would be scrupulously nonpartisan, equally divided Democratic and Republican, equally divided both houses. The arrangement was you couldn't even subpoena one page of a document or a witness unless there was a majority vote, meaning there had to be bipartisan support for it. The Republicans closed ranks here and said that's not what we want. I think we were able to get 8 Republicans to say, yes, we should be able to do this, but 42 said no. The last thing we want is a scrupulously nonpartisan analysis of this once in a lifetime, once in our history, domestic attack on the Capitol. They're trying to ignore it. And so you hear nothing from my colleagues about any of the January 6th evidence because they want to ignore it. They hope it's going to go away. But I don't think it can. It can't go away. You can't do this and have there be no consequence attached to an effort to violently overturn a peaceful election.
I just don't know how you ignore that and still have credibility. Even if you're in the right-wing media and your viewers, are they going to see you as credible if you're not covering it as news? But let's move on to guns, where there is bipartisan agreement to an extent. And in just hours, the next key procedural vote of the bipartisan gun safety bill is scheduled to take place in the Senate. Today's motion is expected to pass. That would then be followed up by 30 hours of debate before a final passage vote, which is now expected tomorrow afternoon. But the issue, Senator, is senators could agree to vote on it before that,
Correct.
Despite roughly a third of the Senate Republican Conference helping to advance the legislation earlier this week. Far fewer Republicans in the House are expected to support the bill. NBC News has learned at a closed-door meeting on Wednesday, House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy and Minority Whip Steve Scalise told House Republicans that they oppose the measure. Politico reports that Scalise will whip Republicans in the House to vote against the Senate agreement, potentially leaving just 15 to 20 House Republicans to support the legislation. The Congressional Budget Office released a cost estimate showing the gun safety bill would be fully paid for. The CBO estimated the bill would reduce the deficit over 10 years by $154 million. There's that and a lot more. Senator, what are your hopes that this makes it through all the halls of Congress without changing?
Mika, I've waited a long time for a vote like this. You know, I was the governor when the worst shooting in the history of the United States at that time happened at Virginia Tech. And this is going to sound weird to say, being the governor of Virginia, I hope that would always be the worst shooting in the history of the United States, that there would never be one that would be worse than that. But then subsequent events, there have been shootings that have claimed even more victims, Vegas and Parkland and Sandy Hook and Pulse nightclub, and then Milwaukee and Texas. But I've waited a long time for Congress to get rid of the gag rule about guns and grow a backbone and do something about guns. And I'm really excited about the vote today. You're right. If the Republicans who oppose the bill want to use up 30 hours to say why they want to oppose it, then we would likely have the final vote tomorrow night. They could give some of that time back. You might see a final vote late this evening, could be tomorrow morning. But we do feel on the cusp of something very positive. Not everything that I might want, but very positive and bipartisan. It's going to pass through the House with minimal Republican support. It's going to get to President Biden's desk, and Congress will have shown that we're finally listening to people who have been asking us for decades to do something about this unacceptable scourge of gun violence.
Listening and acting. Democratic Senator Tim Kaine of Virginia, thank you. Very good to see you, sir.
Good to be with you guys. Thanks.
Thanks. And we're going to have